a production of Flint Energies, your local touch-tone energy cooperative. Front Porch Chats brings you along while we discuss interesting events, people in history, programs, and hidden gems located in Central and Southwest Georgia. Grab a glass of iced tea while we chat for a spell. I'm your host, Natalie Bradley, and today I am excited to have a coworker with me as we're going to talk about some really fun things that are going on at Flint. In 2025, we're featuring different stories on the podcast, interesting people, historic figures in our area, but also we're highlighting creative, interesting, out-of-the-box thinkers and ventures and programs that people are doing right now. And one of those awesome people is Jay Flesher, who works actually in my department. So I'm blessed to be able to work with Jay every day at Flint, and he's got some really fantastic things that he's constantly working on, but we're going to really highlight one program today. So I'm going to actually let Jay talk about who he is, what he does, and then we're going to just kind of roll right into this. So hi, Jay. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Natalie. Good to be with you this morning.
Yeah, so why don't you share what you do with Flint and some of the things that you've worked on and this awesome program that we're going to introduce today.
And part of that is, obviously I'm married for 35 years. I have an awesome wife and a daughter. My wife worked for the school system and retired from the school system as deputy superintendent of Houston County Schools. So there's some synergy there around what I do as far as community development and my life partner and my wife, and then I've got a great daughter that's 26 years old that is in her final year of law school that I'm really proud of. And so again, it's one of those things that always connected to our community. It's interesting as a young adult with a middle school age kid or a young high school kid, when your daughter comes home and says, "You guys know everybody, can't get away with anything," and that's a neat part of being in economic development, community development, and both what I do and what my wife did as an educator. So that's a neat part of who we are and where we get our energy from to make some of this stuff happen. So that's a big part of it. What I do with Flint is do community and economic development with Flint. And so you have the traditional economic development, which is new businesses coming in, taking care of existing industries, and making sure that I'm their advocate for what they need inside of Flint. This is a membership cooperative. Their vote counts. Sometimes their vote is important to us because they're a lot of times a large user. So it's very important for us to stay in tune with what they want and what they need. And that's a part of what the programs that I have underneath my leadership here. Not only from the commercial and industrial side, but also from the ag side. Got a great partner that works underneath me, Matt Denton, who handles all of our key accounts as far as the ag side is concerned. His leadership, both as far as working with our key accounts in the ag side, but also leading the youth programs of FFA and our wiring contest and a lot of the other things that deal with ag. That's a big deal to us as far as our reach, because you got to understand, yes, we serve Warner Robins in Houston County, but we also serve a lot of other communities that have a lot of ag into it. And those industries also need workforce as well, which sort of leads into Matt's recruitment and encouragement of those communities being engaged. Interesting thing, I just said it, workforce development. We're constantly looking for a way to empower our members to be a better workforce, to have better opportunities. A lot of times that comes back into that we're supporting industry, we're supporting the institutions, school systems, technical colleges and universities. So that's a big part of what we do as well, is we listen to those guys and say, what do you need? I always tell folks that Flint will never be the sole investor into anything because we just don't have the money. We won't do that on behalf of our members because we try to be very cognizant of our investments and our memberships and their investment into us. And so what we do a lot of times is we find seed money that we're able to help either start an initiative or actually join an initiative to give it that kickstart. But we're always looking for multipliers. If we put $1 in of investment, we're looking for a partner that's putting maybe $2 or $3 in to help get something to the finish line and be a partner in that. Sustainability at the end of the day of any of these programs that we do that are driven towards our community, sustainability is a big part of that. You just don't want to be one and done, because at that point you really, it might be a great idea, but for it to have its impact long term, you've got to have sustainability and do that long term delivery. And so that's the reason why I always tell folks when they say, well, you guys do this, you guys do that. Well, in reality, what we're doing is we're constantly looking for partners. Very rarely do we do anything alone, just because it's a cooperative. We're looking for the cooperative spirit both inside and outside of our community, or outside of our business model here at Flint. And a lot of times we can do that by supporting initiatives that are already going on.
That's great. So I've worked with a lot of different people in economic development, and what I really love about listening to you talk about your programs and your approach to things is you're a very creative thinker, and the multipliers and the partners, I think that that's an essential component of it, but you also see things differently from a lot of people. And I think that's one of your really big gifts. You've done some really cool things because of the way that you're able to see what's needed and how to create something out of maybe a void. So talk to us about some of those ideas and what's come about.
So in reality, I do think things differently. Sometimes it's a blessing and sometimes that's a curse. Sometimes when because when you start to explain things, at Flint, I always tell folks, well, what do you do at Flint? Well, I translate. I translate from what our engineers say or what our administration says back to our members, in hopes that I'm able to make that connection between what we do and what they do. Mm-hmm. So that's where my gift of thinking differently sometimes comes to bear and is a positive. But from the other side of it, when you're looking at starting initiatives or looking for opportunities to engage, sometimes we go against the grain. And because of that, it's always, well, why do you do it that way? You hear that in your company. Well, in reality, you hear that in community as well. Why do you do it that way? Because we've always done it that way.
Right.
And sometimes in what we do, having a thinker that comes in or somebody that sees the vision of where we might want to be going that's alternative to where the community is currently, that gets to be sometimes a hard road to hoe, that you're basically doing a sales pitch. Almost every time you have a conversation, you're doing a sales pitch saying why do something different, and what are going to be the results of it, and are the results worth the effort of doing it differently?
Yeah.
And that's a measure that we're doing all the time. I mean, there's lots of ideas that we've had. I've had, other people in Flint have had, other people in the community have had, and you start to flesh that out with a group. It's very important that you have a group of cohort that you're able to bounce things off of, so that you can flesh out ideas that people are having, or visions of where to go next that people are having, and have that be a gentle conversation where you're not hurting feelings, you're not causing disruption, but you're truly having a discussion of, is the juice worth the squeeze on the people that you're going to be making uncomfortable? Because a lot of times a new program is adding work to somebody, or it's changing the work style of somebody, or it's not just a new initiative. It's the workflow that comes with that. And it's fundraising that comes with that, and there's a lot of energy that you have to put into that. And is that worth what you're doing? And so our biggest thing that I've sort of been able to do is, when we have these ideas of sitting down with long, I've been in this role for 14 years, but prior to that, I've worked for the Little League International and did their program management on the stadium here that you see where they host their facilities. Well, that put me in working with the county, put me in working with the county of Houston County, put me in work with the city of Warner Robins, put me in where I was working with the Flint Energies. Quite honestly, that's where I actually was introduced to Flint Energies and Jimmy Autry in back in those days. Uh-huh. So, but having that cohort of people that you're able to sound ideas to, and not stir the pot, so that a new idea doesn't have a chance. Because a lot of times you want that new idea to at least have a chance to have an honest conversation around it. And if it doesn't bear out, it doesn't bear out. I mean, we've had a multitude of things over my 14 years here that we've started or at least had a conversation about that either needed to pause, needed to go away, or it just wasn't the right time for it. And you look back and now that I remember when I first came to Flint, I would have an idea and somebody say, "Oh yeah, we tried that 10 years ago," or we tried that 8 years ago. And your question is, well, what was the results? Well, we didn't do it because. So in reality, sometimes it's still worth having that conversation, even though it didn't take the first time. You still want to have a conversation now because times have changed, people have changed, energy's changed, and so that's a big part of this. So I think at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you're always looking for people, and not only people, but you're also looking for resources. Mm-hmm. You and I talked, recently about all the assets that we have in our community, and a lot of times those assets are controlled by individuals or companies or institutions, school system, technical college, city, whatever else. And those assets are used periodically. And so there's been an investment by somebody to put those assets in place, but they're not being used to their maximum potential. Well, that's the other thing we do is we look for resources that are already in place and have a conversation about, hey, if we brought this event or this program to you, or could we use a facility or do something? And that sort of led us to FireStarter. So much about what we did with FireStarter in 2012, which was the lead into all everything that happened with the program. So in 2012, the 21st Century Partnership did a BRAC study, and they came up with a list of 18 to 20 items that the city of Warner Robins and the area really suffered in, that would be a negative if the RAC committee came and looked at our community. Well, 3 of those were sort of, when I read that list and visited with the General McMahon at the time, who was the lead of the 21st Century Partnership, 3 of those items were recruiting and retaining STEM professionals, developing our own STEM professionals, and creating an innovative environment. And I guess the final one was diversifying your economy. So out of that, when you look at, well, what can Flint do to help the base? We can't go in and make the base a better work environment. They do that internally. But what can we do from the community side? So we started brainstorming a little bit. We had a group of us that started brainstorming a little bit. And so we actually said, well, let's work on, we were already working on some STEM support for both the the Air Force Museum here locally. And then also we were working with the board education on STEM investment as well, both in the robotics program and some other stuff. But we started looking around, and so we said, well, we need more entrepreneurs and we need more innovation, because one of the things that we talked about was innovation index. Well, innovation index is about how many people in your community actually own patents.
Okay.
Now, when you see the industrial complex that is Robins Air Force Base, where you have prime contractors, you have government agencies, and you have colleges, universities that people work for. Well, I can tell you now, there's a lot of innovation that happens around both what the military needs, but also what these individuals these individuals come up with. But the problem is when they are fostered within a institution, a lot of times that institution is what owns the patent.
Okay.
And not the individual. And so we kicked around the idea. We worked with Cox at the time on putting together a innovation competition, and we actually called that Ignite. And that was in 2014. We did the Ignite Shark Tank experience, and we had I think we had 8 individuals that submitted their projects, and we interviewed them all, and we narrowed it down after they went through their interviews. We narrowed it down to three, and of that, there was a $10,000 fund set up, so the winner could actually start working on the initiative of doing that fund. If I remember right, I think we had one gentleman had developed a hospitality type of board that you could put chips in charcuteries and all that on, but it looked like a football stadium. And his idea is that with every football stadium, you would be able to develop this out so that every football stadium would have its own model, and you could sell that. Great idea, great idea. We had another gentleman that had a broad tip arrow that is used for hunting, and he was an engineer, and as that broad tip arrow struck his target, it would generate an electric shock that would stun the target, and when it stunned the target, the animal would not withdraw from where you struck it. It would shock it, almost like a stun gun for hunting. And his goal was so that those hunters that were disabled, that they were able to hunt, but they wouldn't have to go track the animal down. So that was his thought process on it. And he made quite a bit of process on that. So that was a neat thing. Okay. And there was one other one, I can't really remember what that one was. But what was interesting of that is we started looking around, and there was nowhere for these folks to be innovative. Mm-hmm. There were innovative spaces, but they were either behind the fence line, they were in an institution, or other thing, which led to, if they developed that idea within that space, then a lot of times the patent would belong in that space. Okay. So we started looking around, and I visited lots of different communities and had lots of conversations nationally. Came across a prototype, or actually an example of what I was looking for in an innovative space, which was called Tech Shop. Went out to California, San Francisco, to see the Tech Shop there. And that was started as a nonprofit, but eventually became a profit. And usually any of these spaces that once they become for profit, they don't last very long. And so even though at the time I had a conversation with the gentleman that ran that facility, I said, Mark, what would it take for us to have one of those in Middle Georgia? And he said, well, you need $3 million. At the time, being positive that I am, I said, well, okay, let's not worry about that. And so then he said, well, you need a population of 1.3 million people to support it. Whoa. And I said, well, we don't have that, and there's no way for me to actually recruit that. Yeah. So my next question to him was, have you seen any other models out there that are reasonable, that sort of mimic what you do, but could be done on a smaller scale? And that's when he actually said, hey, I have talked to some of the folks at MIT, and they have a new model that has rolled out under their processes, and it's called a FabLab. At the time, I think there were probably maybe 15 to 20 Fab Labs in the United States, and probably another 15 to 20 worldwide. Being MIT, you had a lot of people that come and study there and have that innovative space, and would take that idea back to their community when they left from their graduate work, and start up their own Fab Labs. And you had the Fab Lab Foundation at that point standing up as well. So, come around, 2014 and into 15, I've done a lot of research. I've actually went to MIT and talked to some folks up there, and talked to some other communities that had a Fab Lab or two, and saw where the model was going. And the biggest benefit to me is because really it's a big makerspace. But the makerspace, standalone industry is really thought of as being the Wild West of innovation. I mean, they're liable to blow up stuff in the back alley, at a makerspace. I mean, I remember in Augusta there was a makerspace downtown there, and they had a dragon that would blow flames out of it.
Oh my God!
Just about I don't know if they set anything on fire, but it caused a big stir. I think they actually had a flame go out and then reignite and cause quite a boom in downtown Augusta. So that type of thing was really a makerspace was a wild sort of a Wild West type of thing. Well, when you start looking around Warner Robins Houston County, you can look for it to be a standalone, or you can look for partners. And like I said before, we're always trying to look for partners. Don't want to do anything alone. We're empowering our members, we're empowering our community. That's really what our goal is. And so I had to start having a discussion with the Houston County Board of Education, Dr. Scott and his team, and came across at the Houston County Career Academy, came across a 7,000 square foot engineering lab that had gotten some funding, several years before, had a couple programs run through it, but then the defense contractor that sort of helped stand that up either went out of business or left Houston County. And so it wasn't getting the support. They had welding in part of it, and they had the engineering in the front part of it, but they also had a lot of equipment that had outdated itself and everything else. And really, truly, the program was sort of was not on its last leg, but wasn't being supported both from the student perspective. They weren't supporting it, but also when you have that, it doesn't necessarily become a positive experience when you're not doing true innovative stuff.
Yeah.
And so went in and talked to them about their space and said, hey, I got this great idea that I've visited these folks on. Flint's willing to do something with it. And our goal is that, during the day, the students get the advantage of being in a new renovated space with new equipment, with new things to work on during the day. But at 3:30 every day, we want to bring in the general public to use the same equipment and train them as well. Well, there was a lot of things that went on about that conversation. It took a little while to get there, but because of Flint and because of our relationship with the Houston County school system, there was a lot of trust there that we weren't doing something that would harm either organization, but also did look at both stemming better education for our students and better engagement for our community to the school system. We're constantly looking for smart people to volunteer time, and how else do you do that? Then you get them in working on their own project, and you find out they're smart and they're personable and they want to engage, and you engage them in the things you want them to do.
Yeah.
So we were fortunate enough that in 2015, April 2015, we were able to announce that we were going to locate at that point it was called Afterburner FABLab on the campus of the Houston County Career Academy. I had a great retired furniture making teacher from Houston County School System that had been teaching for 28 to 30 years. I can't remember how long Gary Howard had been teaching his skills, but he'd always been around students and still had a passion for it, but it was to a point where he was looking to retire. And so I just went and had a conversation with him one day. I said, hey, this is a crazy idea, but this is what I want to do. Would you be interested in helping me manage the Fab Lab, putting the programs together and everything else? And so, quite honestly, that was probably the linchpin that allowed for this to happen. A lot of times you can put a program together, but if you don't have, again, the sustainability comes from the engagement.
Yeah.
You have to get the community engaged in it. If people are interested, it'll stay open. If people aren't interested, it'll close every day of the week.
Right.
And so he was willing to come in, and I can tell you, here 10 years later, it's amazing to see how self-sustaining that program's been because of his hard work. John Lupino, who is currently our managing board member, a lot of his hard work and investment of his time and money, and then just really truly engaging in the school system. We've made many of podiums and desks and awards and stuff like that help keep the doors open. But the other side of it too is we're able to do classes. We do woodworking classes, we do furniture making classes, we do welding classes, we do have a digital lab there that allows you to imprint on just about anything, embroidery, whatever else. So over the years, we've been able to collect this community of people that are willing to lend their time to help others learn how to use equipment, because we tend not to want to do it for you. We want you to do it yourself. But we want you to do it safely. So we bring you in, put you through a class, and then help you learn how to embroider, or help you learn how to weld, or help you learn how to build furniture, help you learn how to use our lasers for etching and everything else that goes along with that. Those are very powerful machines. But it doesn't take a lot of it doesn't take a long time to learn how to use them. And so that creates that engagement that's super exciting about developing a community. I think from the perspective of where the Fab Lab started, because it was a big part of that was, we were talking with 21st Century Partnership, we were talking with Houston County Schools, we were talking with the county economic development team. We were talking with Robins Air Force Base. I remember Colonel Hill at the time, who was the commander of the 78th Wing out at Air Force Base. Innovation Space, even though at the time we were leading the way in the community at that point, because there weren't a whole lot of conversations about it, he got the picture, he got the vision of what that. So having people like that in your corner as you go and pitch these ideas to people is very important, because, again, you're making people uncomfortable. They're having to make an uncomfortable decision to support you or give you access. And so building a team of support, even if they're not engaged day to day, but having a community champion or multiple community champions is always important when it comes to programs like that.
That's fantastic. So I know people are probably listening thinking, well, how do I go take classes? How can I find out about any more information on this FireStarter lab? How does that work?
Sure. So you can go on to Google your maps and actually type in FireStarter FABLab, and it'll bring up where they're located on your Google Maps. But then also, if you go to FireStarterFABLab.com, that will also point you towards our website. We encourage you to go visit if you're really interested in learning how to do any type of project, from, again, embroidery to woodworking to metalworking. That facility, 3D printing, that facility is just at another level. It has, we were fortunate enough to get a grant from the 21st Century Partnership. Worked out getting a grant for us through the military funding that gave us a $180,000 grant that we had to have matching to get it. And so between the investment of our community and Flint, we were able to do the matching funds to do that. So we have over $400,000 worth of equipment in that building. That's sort of where I was going with that, was that building has a tremendous amount of assets in equipment. And then the personnel asset is they can teach you how to use it, and they're patient enough to teach you how to use it.
Yes.
So I would encourage you to stop by the Fab Lab there on Quarter Drive there at the Houston County Career Academy. You can go online and look at the classes they offer. Go on Facebook. They're on Facebook, FireStarter Fab Lab. See the pictures of what we do and the community that's sort of rallied around the effort. Again, it's been 10 years in the making of this. And so it's interesting, again, when I was able to finally step out of the leadership role, direct leadership role, it did exactly what we wanted it to do. You had community members step in line and take hold of it and make it theirs. And that's exactly what community development is. You're trying to make people step in line and make it theirs.
Yeah. I'm going to make sure that in the show notes, we're going to link directly to the FireStarter Fab Lab website, and I'll also link straight to the Facebook page just to make sure that you can get connected with both easily and sign up for classes, find out more information. I just think it's fascinating. I've been a maker my whole life. Like, I just love making anything, and I just think that this is really neat because a lot of people, I think, have the desire to do it, but they may not know how to get started or how to get off the ground, or they may be intimidated, like you said, by the equipment, especially certain demographics. I think that technology can be extremely intimidating, and I think that it can lower that barrier very easily for people to see it's not as scary as you think it is, and let's break it down. And I really love that.
And Natalie, really, truly, so I've been around entrepreneurs all my life.
Yes.
My grandmother was an entrepreneur from, she owned lumber yards and marinas and all kinds of stuff throughout her life. And so I really took a lot of my innovation or ingenuity, or I guess, maybe the vision that you were talking about, seeing things differently. I took it from her,
Yeah.
and so entrepreneurship was a big part of this as well. And again, you talked about, not knowing how to use the equipment, but also not knowing how to start a business.
Yeah.
And so our first lead-in was the FireStarter Entrepreneurship Council was the lead-in of this whole genesis of ideas. And we had a board of directors that we stood up when we stood that program up that really focused on innovation. I remember, and this is a little bit of a tribute to the legacy of Flint. What empowered this inside of Flint were two people, primarily, along with our board of directors. But you had Jimmy Autry that I was able to sit down and have a conversation with about what my idea was. And he thought enough of it that he gave me a little bit of time to go research how things would happen, what it looked like in other communities, what would it look like here. And then we went and visited with Bob Ray, who was our president CEO at the time. And it was a leap for Bob. I mean, it was not necessarily something that he was overly optimistic would be successful, but he also knew that we had energy and was excited about trying to do it, so he let something happen. Well, what was interesting is our first Firestarter meeting, and it was around entrepreneurship. We had the SBA in, and we held it down here at our member center in our community room. We had SBA coming in. We had a employment lawyer coming in, and we had a banking institution come in, and we're going to talk about starting a business. And so, when we told Mr. Ray what we were doing, he said, yeah, you guys will get, 15 or 20, maybe 30 people there. And so as time went on, we put out the invitation to show up. And we, a day or so ahead of time, he said, how things going? And I said, everything's going great. We're looking good for our folks to be here. He says, well, how many people do you have coming? And so I currently have 110 people registered to be here. And it completely shocked him that was the case, because in reality, you just don't know until you put it out there. And really, truly, the yearning for entrepreneurship is in our membership. There are people in our membership that want to know how to start a business and want to be successful in their business. And I remember, out of that one meeting, I can remember over the last, 10 years or so, I can remember coming across a person that was in that meeting that is now a business owner. And having them understand that your first business idea may not be the greatest idea, but the faster you get to your idea and either make the proof of concept work or see that it is not financially successful, gives you the ability to look for your next one.
Yeah.
And a true entrepreneur doesn't stop at one.
Right.
A true entrepreneur keeps going until they find out what is successful. And sometimes they keep going after that, even after they find success. And so that was really what we were looking for. And that was really a hidden need that sort of stemmed out of that. And so we were all shocked about that. And that really justified why we put the investment in it, of both time and money from Flint's perspective. And we constantly do things that support entrepreneurship. Currently, right now, we're working with the Houston County School System and Houston County Board of Education and Houston County Development Authority, along with other key partners, Central Georgia Technical College, on the Georgia Flex program. And it's a Shark Tank environment. Again, it's entrepreneurship driven, where we're going in and recruiting high school kids in our local community that want to start a business, and they have to build a business plan and submit that. And then once they're selected, they get to actually go into the Flex program, which is about 6 months worth of training in mentorship, engagement that helps them build both a business, but also maybe a product line or something like that. So we're in the midst of that going on currently in Houston County. So entrepreneurship is a big thing as well, because not only do you want the business start, but you want the entrepreneurship spirit to carry on.
Yeah.
And empowering kids, empowering folks that have historically not been empowered because that maybe their parents have never been entrepreneurs or owned a business. Empowering those people to think, I can do this if I have help. Well, let's find where we can give them the help and get them kicked off. So that's another program that sort of dovetails into what we're doing with Firestarter. And it is a constant thing. And our goal is once we get up rolling in Houston County, try to offer that in some other areas as well.
Oh, yay. Yeah. I can't wait to see how that unfolds. And we'll have to do another conversation about that program. I've been following that for a while and I'm fascinated by the whole, I mean, it's just been so successful. So I'm really excited about that. So, well, thank you. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to make sure that people know, or do you feel like we covered everything?
So you'll see the schedule online, but a couple things happens that's very important. If you're interested in class, because of our demand on classes, we stopped taking that online because there were so many people that were wanting it and they did sign up for it. In either something would happen where they couldn't be there, and communication sort of broke down on that. Yeah. So what we started making folks do is we want you to come see the facility. So come into the facility, meet with our folks, see what the environment is, and then once that happens, let's talk about what classes you want. We got a great staff that's there, willing to help you both from the sign-up perspective, but also have a conversation about what your project is. Now, sometimes you'll come in and say, okay, I got this big project I want to do. I want to do this and this and that. A lot of times we pull the brakes back on that a little bit. It's like, great, I love where you're going with this, but let's start from the initial side of this let's get you educated on how to use a piece of equipment. Again, we don't want to do it. We don't want to do it for you. We will help you do it, but we don't want to do it for you. So again, I would encourage you to come in, go to the Fab Lab on Quarter Road, meet with our staff. They're open Mondays 4 to 9. They're open 4 to 6 on Tuesdays and Thursdays because we have class that start after 6.
Okay.
They're open Friday 4 to 9 as well, and then Saturday they're open 9 to 2. Okay. So and you'll see the information on how it's open, when it's open. If you go online or the Facebook page, they'll post stuff there, holiday schedule stuff. But I would encourage you that if you have an interest in innovative spaces or innovative production things, I would encourage you to go visit and have a conversation. You'll find your community there. If that's truly who you are, you will find your community there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jay. I just think that this is wonderful on many levels. And I always love hearing how Flint is partnering and empowering our communities. And it's such an extremely perfect example of cooperative at work. And obviously it's very successful with 10 years and still going strong and pulling in another layer with that flex program. So I'm just really excited to see how this takes shape and continues evolving over the next few years. So I appreciate you taking the time to share with everybody, and we're going to stalk your progress.
Well, so we will also be leaning into some other programs coming up soon. So keep your eyes open as we start to roll some things out. And again, it's focusing on our community and trying to empower both the education side and the workforce development side of our community, and make sure we have places that our members want to work and support those people that employ our folks.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Jay.
You got it. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Front Porch Chats. Make sure to follow Front Porch Chats wherever you listen to your podcast. Give us a 5-star review and share with your friends and family. It really helps us get more eyes and ears on what's happening throughout Central and Southwest Georgia.